All right, welcome to our masterclass for the Executive Program in Digital Media for Social Impact. We're very glad you're here, excited to tell you more about the program and give you a sense of what content you'll learn in the program by demonstrating one of our key tools for students. I'm Rosemary Clark-Parsons. I'm a program manager at the Center for Social Impact Strategy. I focus mainly on our executive programs. And over the past year, one of the main focal points of my work here has been developing out this brand new program in digital media for social impact. Very excited about it, very excited to share it with you all and hopefully welcome you into the program when we kick off in February 2022. With me today is Ariel Schwartz, who is our managing director, and I'll let Ariel say hello quickly.
Hi, it's so nice to see you here. Thank you so much for joining and your interest in this program, which we're really excited about. As Rosie mentioned, I'm Ariel Schwartz. I use she, her pronouns, and I am managing director at the Center for Social Impact Strategy, where I've been working since about 2015 on curriculum development, developing executive programs for people who are really excited to make the world a better place in some way. So really eager to get to know you better in your applications and to hear your questions today. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we're very glad you're here. And the main purpose for us gathering today is to think through whether this executive program is right for you in this moment in your life and your career, or maybe right for someone that you might know. Oops, that's a duplicate. So what to expect today? You'll be hearing about a tool that we teach in actually the very first week of this executive program, and you'll have your questions answered by the CSIS team. If you have questions after the session, this is of course, not your last chance to ask questions. We welcome you to reach out to us via email. In terms of how to participate today, we'll be working through a framework, and to allow you to follow along with that framework, we have a worksheet that's hosted on Google Sheets, and Ariel just posted the bit.ly link for that in the chat. If you don't have access to Google Docs, let us know. We also have an Excel version of this on hand as well. And I recommend having some writing tools on hand for a brief journaling moment in our session today. We invite you to submit questions at any point throughout the session today. You can use the chat to submit questions or the Q&A feature. Ariel will be moderating the chat, and I'll try my best to be looking at it as we move through the tool we're talking about today. We will have a focused Q&A session too at the end of the workshop today, but you don't have to wait until the very end to get your question answered. After the session, please feel free, like I said, to reach out to us at admissions@csis.upenn.edu. Okay. So as I mentioned, the tool that we are going to take a look at today is taught in the very first week of the very first core course in this program. That course is called The Social Impact of Digital Media. That course is taught by myself and by my friend and mentor, Dr. Guobin Yang. Guobin is the Grace Lee Boggs Professor of Communications and Sociology here at Penn. Both Dr. Yang and myself research and teach on topics related to digital media, culture, and social movements. Both of us have a background in communication research, but we each bring a pretty unique perspective to this course. While my research and teaching is focused on the relationship between digital media and the practice of social change, Dr. Yang is really a leading expert on theories and concepts that help us critically analyze and talk about social change dynamics. So in this course, we're kind of joining forces to ground you in research-driven frameworks that will help you make important decisions about your digital media practices. So like I said, this is the first course you'll encounter in the program. And we actually divide it into two parts, with our hybrid March convening falling in the middle of the two parts, just to give you a sense of the roadmap for the program. If you would like a more detailed look at the way this program plays out over the course of 5 months, I highly recommend checking out a recording of one of our prior information sessions where we're really focusing on the logistics of the program. A little bit more about this course. It's focused on how the internet and digital technologies have really transformed social impact work. We look at the affordances and limitations of digital media for creating positive change in our communities. We also work on articulating your theory of change or your long-term goals for creating impact and how you might incorporate digital media into that process. We round out that conversation by mapping out your audience network or the people, communities, and stakeholders that you seek to engage, and thinking through how digital media might help us mobilize those networks and help promote our mission. By the end of the course, you'll be ready to begin planning a mission-aligned digital campaign for your social impact organization or venture. And that's where you begin in the next core course, which is digital marketing for social impact. So in this course, we really set you up with thinking through your orientation toward digital media and social impact. And then in the next core course, you hit the ground running and begin building out a plan for your digital media campaign or strategy. Each week of this course and all of the courses that follow introduce tools that will help bring you one step closer to the goal of developing a mission-aligned digital campaign for your organization or venture. And the tool that I'm sharing with you today is taught in that first week of the course because it offers a great starting point for assessing your current digital media practices so that you might begin thinking through what opportunities there are to strengthen your digital media practices or pivot to align them more closely with your mission. So the tool that helps us do that, we call it the Digital Media Audit. The first step in moving toward a mission-driven set of digital media practices is to take stock of the online channels and platforms that you're currently using, as well as the channels and platforms that your key stakeholders are using, or the communities and people that you want to engage with in your social impact work. Doing so gives us a great starting point of where we're at when it comes to our digital strategy, what opportunities there might be for aligning them more closely with our social impact goals and values and where we want to go. Digital Media Audit allows us to do this work to take stock of our current digital practices. It's a systematic, holistic examination of the online presence of an organization or venture, including its own website, its social media profiles, but also stakeholders' engagement with online channels. While, as you might be thinking already, organizations and ventures across sectors can benefit from doing this kind of work, it's especially important for folks who are engaged in social impact work, because the goal of this audit is to really think through our approach to digital media and whether or not it's in line with our social impact values and mission. The audit helps us develop a number of important habits for mission-driven approaches to digital media. It helps us think more explicitly and intentionally about everything from our website to our social media profiles as practices that should contribute to our overarching mission, rather than as tools that we use to just promote the work that we're doing elsewhere. It helps us fold in our digital outreach into our broader repertoire of social impact work. This orientation, I think, pushes us toward more effective online outreach that brings us closer to achieving our social impact goals. The audit is also a very practical tool for keeping tabs on our many digital channels, their purposes, and our metrics for evaluating success on those channels, all in one document. If you're like our team here, it's likely that you have many different social media profiles, many places where our audiences can reach and engage with you. And it can be pretty easy to lose track of where you should be engaging and keep tabs on each of those environments. So this tool is great for just keeping track of where you're at online. This is also really important just for keeping those channels active, for developing a clear set of practices for evaluating those channels, and for cultivating a cohesive public-facing message across all those channels, making sure our messaging across them is really integrated. When we shift the audit away from our organization and towards stakeholders and community members, this tool can help us capture where our target audience hangs out online, where they're engaging, and what they might be saying about our work. can be easy to assume that if we build it, they will come, right? That if we have a presence on Facebook, folks will follow us and we'll get our word out to them. But we actually need to think a little bit more deeply about where the people we want to reach are online, what their media consumption habits are like, and how we might meet them where they're at. And then finally, the audit helps us identify opportunities for a more strategic alignment between our digital practices and our social impact mission. It gives us a space to visualize where we are, and not only where we would like to go, but where we're well positioned to go based on the current strengths of our online presence. So it offers both a snapshot in time of our current digital practices and a forward-looking vision for future engagement. I'm going to walk you through how to conduct the audit shortly, but first there are some warm-up questions that you should consider as you prepare to examine your digital practices. And this is the point at which it would be great if you have writing implements ready to go. So here are some warm-up questions. First, how would you describe your social impact mission? If you're currently developing or working at an organization, you might have a formal mission statement to help the public understand the purpose of your work or help your team be on the same page about your goals. But for the purposes of this exercise, it can be useful to start with a blank slate. And instead of pulling from that formal document, summarize in your own words how you currently understand your mission. If you're not currently working at or developing an organization or venture, you might consider instead documenting your personal social impact vision statement or mission. In either case, this will give you a really clear and useful reference point for evaluating the purpose and effectiveness of your digital media practices. Second, how do you use digital media currently to pursue that mission? While the digital media audit will ask you to get pretty specific, here I encourage you to think in more general terms. So for example, at the Center for Social Impact Strategy, our mission is to make tools and resources for social impact available to anyone, anywhere. Digital media help us do that. They help us share out and promote our library tools and resources and connect with audiences and learners who might benefit from them. A general concept of where digital practices might plug into your mission will help guide your auditing work that we'll do in just a few moments. And then finally, what about your key stakeholders or the community members you seek to engage? Do you know how they engage online and what needs or expectations might they bring regarding your online engagement? Jotting down some general thoughts about your target audience's expectations will help you keep their perspective in mind as you identify challenges and opportunities in your current digital media approach. So what I'm going to do is give you about 5 minutes to do some journaling in response to these prompts. And then we're going to move on to actually walking through the digital media audit. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But for now, I'm going to stop talking and play some thinking music for you so you can do some journaling work. All right. So I hope that those questions got you warmed up and primed to do this auditing work. We're ready to jump in, I think, now that we've oriented ourselves to this task a little bit and know more about the goals of conducting this audit. I'm going to walk you through the digital media audit framework in some general terms first, and then we're going to apply it to a case study so you can get a sense of what it looks like in action. The audit framework that we use in this program is adapted from the work of Keith A. Kiesenberry, who is an award-winning social media marketer and professor. It's inspired by the principle of the 5 W's, which if your background is in media, communication, or journalism might be familiar to you. Those W's are who, where, what, when, and why. And for our model, we also incorporate how. The digital media audit asks, who is talking or who is posting or engaging on the digital channels we're examining? This might be your organization or a particular group of people who play an important role in your work, such as your active volunteers and supporters, clients or customers or beneficiaries. The next W is where. So where is the engagement taking place? As in what particular digital channel or environment are we focusing on here? That might be your website or a particular social media platform like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. The what is what content is being shared and what is the overall sentiment of that content. So for instance, you might use the audit to document what people are saying about your organization and whether what they're saying has a positive or a negative valence or something somewhere in between. When covers when we are engaging or the frequency of our posts. Perhaps your organization has a very steady social media calendar with content published on a regular basis, or perhaps you post more sporadically. This part of the audit asks you to document that as specifically as you can. Why? Why are we engaging? Or how do our digital media presence and practices contribute to our mission? How do we evaluate whether our engagement actually contributes to our mission and practice? And here we're talking really about performance indicators we can capture to measure the effectiveness of our digital practices. When we walk through a case study, you should get a better sense of what I mean here by performance indicators. And then finally, our digital media audit also asks us whether we might be able to identify challenges or opportunities for growth within our current digital media practices. Documenting these can give us the starting points of an action plan for strengthening our online outreach efforts. So I'm going to walk you through our digital media audit framework using my team at the Center for Social Impact Strategy as a case study. You can follow along with the audit in the worksheet that's provided. I see that the link is in the chat, but you can also always refer back to these slides, which we'll share after the session is over, along with the recording, as an example of how to complete this framework. And you can bring that, to conversations with your team or your own reflection work long after the session is over. So as I mentioned earlier, our mission at the center is to make tools and resources for social impact available to anyone, anywhere. We believe in providing cutting-edge content with immediate real-world application. Our programs are designed for accessibility and affordability. So I've written that down. I'm going to keep it in mind as I analyze our organization's current digital practices. So in this case, the who is us, is the Center for Social Impact Strategy. And I've chosen to take a look at two different places, two different channels for the where. The first is a specific section of our website. That's the independent learning section. And the other is our Facebook page for the center. So what's happening in these two locations? In the first, in the independent learning page, the content that we're posting includes tools, case studies, research that comes out of the center or from friends and colleagues of the center. We share free online classes there, as well as what we call staff picks, or the latest book or research article that a staff member might be reading that we think might be super useful to members of our community. On our Facebook page, what are we posting? We're posting information about programs like this one. We also have a paid advertising campaign that runs through that page. We post information about recruitment. We spotlight our alumni and we post general news and events that are coming out of the center. Frequency of post. We try to post to the independent learning section at least 1 or 2 times per quarter to keep that content fresh. But our Facebook page is much more active. We have a programmed social media calendar, and we're posting there about 4 to 5 times per week. So why? Why do we engage with these channels? What is their purpose, and how do they contribute to our mission? Our independent learning section of the website helps us fulfill our goal to provide freely accessible tools and resources to people who are engaged in social innovation or social impact work. Our programs, many of our programs come with tuition fees, but the content that's posted there is meant to be freely accessible and applied to social impact work. It's also a great place for prospective students like yourselves to understand, what kind of content we're teaching and to kind of gauge fit between the content that we're teaching and your personal learning and professional goals. In terms of the why behind our Facebook page, our real goal is to build brand awareness, to make folks aware of the work that we're doing and to associate CSIS with education and research related to social impact. It's also another great way to connect with potential students. We receive DMs from potential students learning about our programs. They comment on our posts. It's just a great way to connect with people looking to learn more about us. And it also helps us maintain important relationships with our alumni who continue to enhance our programs long after they finish their own certificates. Okay, so the how, those performance indicators I'd mentioned earlier, how can we assess whether each of these channels is actually contributing to our mission in the way that we imagine or intend them to? For our website, one of our performance indicators is eyeballs. How many people are actually landing on that page of our website so that they might access and apply the tools we're sharing there. Here, an easy metric to pull related to that is website traffic. And we do that primarily through Google Analytics. This is not a tool you're familiar with. It is a tool that we go into detail in our second core course. So we'll be moving through very specific tools and dashboards you can use while doing this work. We also tend to post the stuff that we share in independent learning on social media. So understanding how that content is spreading through our social media platforms is also another useful indicator of whether or not people are actually accessing the tools that we share there. Similarly, our performance indicators are ways of measuring how our Facebook page is contributing to our mission. Include your standard social media analytics, so things like how many followers do we have, how many likes are we getting on our posts, shares and comments, how much traffic is coming from our Facebook posts to our website. So social media metrics are certainly not the only kinds of indicators that you can pull, but in these two instances, they are really useful for helping us understand if we're actually reaching an audience and a set of people who could be activated to use our tools or consider our programs. So having mapped out all of this, we can think about what opportunities there might be for growth or what challenges we could try to address moving forward. In terms of our independent learning section and also really our Facebook page, one of our current challenges is just staff capacity. It takes a lot of work to create content that is valuable and useful and to moderate and engage with social media channels. So one of our current goals that we're working towards is increasing capacity for this type of online engagement. In both cases, we'd also like to strive to post a bit more frequently to keep those engagement levels higher. And we know that the content we currently have on our website in that section is really useful and really valuable. So there's an opportunity there to post about it a little bit more accurately across our Facebook and other social media sites so that folks can access and engage with those tools. Then finally, another opportunity we've identified and have been thinking through is how we might create a pipeline from a member of our team has created some really exciting content to making sure it's posted out on our social media page or emailed to alumni. There should be a sort of step-by-step pipeline flow of content from creation to reception by our target audience members. So having taken a look at that case study, what we're going to do is begin applying this framework to your own organization or venture, or your own personal digital media practices. If you haven't already, I encourage you to open up that worksheet. We're going to take each of the elements one by one and spend just a couple minutes documenting initial thoughts for each. You can take this worksheet with you after the session and do a more thorough audit on your own or with your team. But for now, we're just going to get a sense of how to use the framework and jot down some initial thoughts. So for this workshop session, you might choose to focus your who on your particular organization or venture or yourself. So that's a fairly straightforward one. But for your where, you might choose to focus on one or two wheres for now and consider conducting a more comprehensive audit by documenting all of your channels after this session ends. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think through, for the purposes of this exercise, what particular channel you would like to think through as you conduct your audit. So I'll give you a minute there. All right, so hopefully you've selected at least one channel that you can focus on for purposes of this exercise. Thinking about that channel, I want you to reflect on what content is being shared and what the overall sentiment of that content might be. Right, so are we posting content that has a positive balance that encourages people to join our work, or are we posting content that might be more solemn or serious in tone because we're activating awareness about a social issue? Just take a moment to record the general types of content you share on that channel. So when, another fairly straightforward category here. How frequently are you posting? Do you know offhand that you post once a week, every other week, once a month, or that you send out an email, say, if that's your focus, once every quarter? How frequently are you posting, and how specific can you get? This question, I think, is a good indicator too about whether or not you have a concrete, strategic, social or digital media plan in place. Because if you're not sure how frequently you post, it might be an opportunity to sit down and think about what that digital outreach calendar looks like for you and whether you might need to get a little bit more specific or concrete there. Thinking about our why, and this is tricky. We know that we need to be online. We should be on social media. Our organization needs that public face. It's often how people encounter us for the very first time. I want to see how specific you can get about why this particular channel is important for your mission. What purpose does it serve? And here, it's important to keep in mind that we can spend a lot of time on these channels, making them look professional, making our messaging sound on brand. Why is that work important, and how does that advance your mission? I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that. Right, so We have a general sense of why we're engaging in digital outreach work. Do you know how you might measure whether or not your digital outreach work is living up to that why, if it's actually contributing to your mission? Here you could draw on some of the social media metrics I had mentioned before, but there's other types of data points that can be useful here as well. Like maybe a key indicator of your performance is whether or not people are showing up to the events that you're advertising on these platforms, or whether you have an active volunteer base and you know that they learned about you because of your digital outreach strategies. So those metrics can be helpful, but we can think beyond them as well. The point of documenting them here is that it helps us stay accountable to continually checking in on these digital practices and not just engaging in them without thinking about it, but having a clear-cut way that we're going to measure whether our work on these channels is effective. So think for a minute about what types of performance indicators you might use to evaluate your digital channel and its effectiveness. And then finally, we've documented all of these pieces, taking stock of where you're at now with the channel you're focusing on. Can you name any challenges or opportunities here? Are there some capacities that need to be expanded in order for you to engage with this channel a little bit more effectively? Is there something exciting happening on that channel? Are you seeing lots of vocal support from volunteers or other community members that maybe you could utilize in an exciting new way in your messaging? What opportunities might be here for advancing your digital practices? All right, so I hope you've had a brief opportunity to kind of jot down some thoughts for each of these, but as I said, this is yours to take with you, and I hope that you find it useful in conversations about your digital practices with your team, or even with your own personal reflection. We're going to jump back into our case study, but this time thinking through how we might audit our stakeholders' digital media practices. Often when we talk about digital outreach, we focus our energy almost entirely on what we're doing. What is our organization doing online to connect with audiences? But it's really important to take a close look at what the people we want to connect with and engage with, what they're doing online. Right? Because if we're not meeting them where they're at or understanding what platforms or channels they're using, we're going to have a pretty tough time connecting with them and reaching them. So again, we're going to come back to the Center for Social Impact Strategy and map out some of our stakeholders' practices online. I've decided for this exercise to focus on our alumni. So our alumni of our executive programs as well as our residential programs. So that's my who. I'm taking a look at two different channels for my where column. There is this fantastic CSIS member network. It's a private Facebook group. So that's one of my channels I'll be focusing on. It has upwards of 800 members in it currently, and these are alumni from our various programs. I'm also going to look generally at LinkedIn, which tends to be a pretty popular platform for both prospective students and alumni of our programs. So what's being posted here? In our member network group, we see job postings. So when alumni have a job posting at the organization, they're sharing it out there. Lots of really interesting crowdsourcing requests. Like I'm encountering this particular challenge with my organization or my team, and I could use some insights from the hive mind of that group. Exchanges of resources, exciting events that might be relevant to the group that members want to share. Members are coordinating meetups. We have alumni spread out around the world, and they're using the group to connect with their near neighbors for a local meetup, and also sharing some funding opportunities. So those are the main categories of content we see there. And generally that the sentiment of these posts, as you can tell, tends to be excitement or a positive sentiment around new opportunities for professional growth. On LinkedIn, we see our alumni share professional updates, posts about starting the program. So when students get to the start of our program, they post that as an exciting milestone in their professional development. And then we see lots of lovely posts, after the program is over, students celebrating that moment of achievement in the executive program. Here with our frequency of posts for our Facebook group, as administrators of that group, we have access to some interesting metrics, and we've seen that over the past 30 days, there have been 11 posts, 12 comments, and 86 reactions or likes and other emoji reactions to posts. And the LinkedIn content's a little bit trickier to pin down in terms of frequency, but we see a pattern that varies with the program cycle, with our beginning and end points having the highest post frequencies from our students in terms of posts that are relevant to CSIS work. Why? So why do we engage in these channels in the first place? One of our goals is to cultivate a community of change makers, and hosting that Facebook group helps us do that in a very real and tangible way. There is a place, a hub for this community to gather and connect with one another. It also helps us maintain relationships with our alumni who, as I mentioned earlier, play a pivotal role in the growth of our programs. They often serve as teaching fellows in our programs. They continue to attend our events and give us all sorts of ideas for developing our programs further. The why behind LinkedIn. Why do we engage on this platform? Again, maintaining relationships with current and former students. We get to share content on our own LinkedIn site as well. We share profiles of the types of learners who come through our programs so that, again, prospective students can gauge that fit question. We can also use LinkedIn to amplify alumni. So if we see our alumni posting about this exciting update in their career, or this new accomplishment, we can repost that and share it out with our own audience. Performance indicators. Some, again, standard metrics around engagement and number of members on Facebook. And on LinkedIn, we see something similar in the backstage. There are metrics showing number of times we've been tagged in someone's post, number of followers, visitors, and the overall engagement with our own posts. Opportunities. So in this Facebook group, we're often seeing amazing stories from students related to outcomes from their learnings in the program. But those stories, of course, stay in the group, right? Because it's a private Facebook group. You can only get access to it if you're approved. There is an opportunity there, I think, to ask, of course, students for consent to share those stories outside the group so that prospective students can get a sense of some of the trajectories of our alumni. There's also an opportunity here to promote a little bit more engagement. The 11 posts a month is okay, but it could be more. And as a staff, we could consider posting some conversation starters in that group. On LinkedIn, one opportunity we've identified is that it would be great to just have a sort of database of where our students are at on LinkedIn, how we can find them and make sure that we're following them, we're sharing their posts. That platform also has some interesting community building tools that we're still learning about. There's some group options similar to Facebook. So we want to think a little bit more about how LinkedIn can be used effectively as a community building tool, since it does seem to be relevant and important to prospective and former students. All right, so again, I want us to walk through this framework, thinking about your own set of stakeholders or community members. Here, I encourage you to get specific. So for example, not just to say supporters, but to say something like active supporters or folks who volunteer on a regular basis with our organization. So name your who as specifically as you can. I'll give you a few moments to think about who your who is going to be. Then thinking about your who, do you know where they are online? Where are they engaging regularly? Do you have data that lets you know where they're currently engaging? If this question is tricky to answer, it might be a sign that you need to do some more groundwork, some research on where potential stakeholders or current stakeholders in your work might be engaging online. This can take many forms, and it's something we discuss in our second core course of the program, but it can be as simple as just talking to the people you're already connected with who either benefit from your service offerings or help support the work that you're doing. Understand where they're hanging out online, and that might open up a network of more potential supporters. So think about, for the purposes of this exercise, 1 or 2 channels where your who, the people in your who, are engaging. All right, so what are they doing on those platforms? What types of content are they posting? Here again, as in the case of analyzing our own digital practices, it helps to be specific and even come up with some categories of types of content. Depending on your work, you might think of content related to reviews of your offerings, content related to messaging around the issue you're addressing, and content related to perhaps personal stories that that user might share on that platform. And our win. Do you have a sense of how often these community members or stakeholders are engaging online? Is there a regular schedule where they might be on a particular app or platform at a particular moment? And if we know that frequency, if we understand that rhythm in their engagement, that gives us a leg up on knowing when we might be able to meet them there in the moment. Why? Why is it important to know where these folks are engaging? How does their engagement, or might their engagement, contribute to your social impact work? Again, because we want to track our progress toward achieving our goals, what types of indicators or metrics could we draw on to understand whether or not that content or that form of engagement our stakeholders are engaging in contributes to our mission? And then lastly, our challenges and opportunities. Is there something more we can do to be engaging with people where they're at? Is there great content that stakeholders are generating that we might roll into our own content strategy? Of course, with consent and permission and proper attribution to the folks who are producing that content. Oftentimes, the best types of organic digital outreach content starts with the actual people and communities we're trying to serve. That's the most genuine and authentic type of messaging we can access about the work that we're doing. All right, great. So now that we have walked through both pieces of this digital media audit, I want to talk a little bit about how you can adapt or expand this tool to map on to some of your specific goals or needs, depending on your mission or your organization. So we're going to walk piece by piece through this and talk about some alterations you can make to fit your specific goals. So in terms of the who, this can be a great place to list something as pragmatic as account info. How do we log in? And who on our team is the primary point person for managing that channel? When we're talking about our stakeholders and trying to map them in this audit framework, it can be extremely helpful to segment and be specific. I had mentioned this earlier, saying something like our active volunteers or people who are engaging in our service offerings this many times per month can be a really helpful way to segment. You might also consider auditing like-minded organizations or competitor organizations and their digital practices. What are they doing online? What works really well about their outreach strategies? What can we learn from what they're doing? In terms of the where, again, it's super helpful to segment and be specific when possible. So rather than saying, I'm auditing Twitter, all of Twitter, it can be really useful to say, no, I'm going to look at this hashtag that's actually really relevant to the type of dialogue I want to be engaged in. As we said earlier, it's important here when the audit is focused on stakeholders that you're working from a very clear understanding of where they are at online, right? We see a lot of organizations posting very frequently on Facebook, which is great, but can be not so great if your stakeholders are not in the age demographic that tends to be hanging out or posting on Facebook. Maybe you need to start thinking about moving some messaging strategies to TikTok or other emerging platforms. So what type of content or sentiment is being shared here? Categorizing your what's can be really useful. Internally at CSIS, we think about our posts in a few different categories, program promotion or recruitment, sharing resources or a spotlight of an alumni or another friend of the center who's doing exciting work. Coming up with categories can help make sure you're really diversifying the content that you have there and give you a sense of whether you're filling each of those category buckets so that the type of content people are encountering on your pages feels varied and engaging. When you're analyzing the content that community members are sharing, thinking about sentiment is really important. So figuring out what your plan will be when you receive positive or neutral feedback related to your offerings, or more importantly, negative feedback. How will you engage with folks who are criticizing your work online? It's something that all organizations with a public face encounter. So having that sort of strategy in mind before you even enter this auditing work can be really important. So thinking about your win, your frequency of posting, you might consider a couple questions that you could answer in additional columns on this framework. You might think about whether a program or customer timeline informs your posting. So for instance, at the center, we have a recruitment cycle, right? We're recruiting for our cohorts that start in January and February of 2022. So our posting calendar should reflect that sort of recruitment cycle in the learner's journey through finding out about our program to applying to enrolling in the program. You might have a similar type of schedule or external timeline that should inform your posting. As I mentioned before, thinking about whether or not your community members or stakeholders are posting at particular times. Maybe there's a moment where the way they're engaging with the issue you focus on, or the way they're engaging with you, informs the time at which they post. Like we had mentioned, seeing all sorts of celebratory graduation posts at the end of a program. Understanding that sort of natural rhythm to posting can help you inform your own posting frequency. On both sides, the organization side and stakeholder side, when you're thinking about your why or the contribution to mission, specificity again is key. Thinking about in specific terms, your inputs and your outcomes. So you might want to gain more followers, that's fine, but gain more followers, why? We want to gain more followers to increase awareness of our service offerings. Getting a little bit more specific there can help us think, in a more incisive manner about whether or not these channels are contributing to our mission. One message I'd love for folks to leave this program with is that when we're thinking about our how, whether or not our digital practices are effective, I think it's important to think beyond our social media metrics. Those metrics are important. We need to know if people are seeing us online, because if they're not seeing us online, then they're not going to engage with the type of content we're putting out there. But you can also do other types of research work to collect metrics and data related to your performance. You can survey stakeholders to understand their customer journey, from learning about you online to actually engaging with you face-to-face, in person, or through some other capacity. And finally, when we're thinking about opportunities and challenges, being honest is key. It can be really hard to think honestly and openly about how we can grow. But I encourage you, when you're doing this, to ask yourself what's working and what's not working. And how could what's working help us with the problem areas that we're facing or the challenges? And finally, as you're thinking about challenges and opportunities, talk to your stakeholders, talk to your community members. What types of engagement would they like to see? It can be so easy to get caught up in our own creative processes and visions, but talking to the people we're trying to engage with and understanding their goals and what they would love to see from us can be really transformative when it comes to your strategic communications. Right, so after the audit, now what? What do we do with this framework once we've filled it in? I have some questions for you to consider after you've had a chance to conduct a bit more of a comprehensive audit. You can think about, are all of my digital channels contributing to my mission? And if they aren't, are there channels that could be cut from my outreach work? As I mentioned, this can be very time consuming. Are there channels that we are wasting time on? Or are there channels that should be added? Is the demographic we're trying to reach really engaging somewhere else? What immediate next steps are needed to pursue the opportunities or troubleshoot the challenges you identified? How might you create an accountability system to track those performance indicators for each channel over time? It's fine to write them down and say that this is how we can measure, but can you actually create a plan to regularly check in with those indicators and those metrics? Do I need more research to understand when and where key stakeholders engage online? Do we really know about what types of content they're consuming? And lastly, and most importantly, when and how will I revisit this audit? Just as platforms emerge and change, our online outreach fluctuates over time. Returning to this framework will help you track and evaluate your digital practices and keep them in line with your social impact values and goals. So that about wraps it up for our overview of that tool. We'll be sending out these slides afterwards with some links to other resources, including the book that we adapt this tool from. We also include a link to a workshop session we had over the summer focused on a persuasive communication. So if you're interested more generally in thinking about communication and strategic storytelling strategies, this is a great recording to check out. Some key dates for the program. The early application deadline is coming up on November 8th. If you enroll by that date, you'll have access to the discounted early tuition. And then our regular deadline is a month later on December 8th. And our program begins, our inaugural cohort kicks off the program on February 1st. So now we'd be happy to take any questions you might have about what we covered today or questions about the program. Any questions? And don't be shy. Yep, thanks Ariel for sharing those links. Yeah, you can find recordings of our information session at that link and also on our website, which is up here at asc.upenn.edu/DMSI. Yeah, great question. So how long does this course last in the program and what types of projects might we be working on? So this course is in total 6 weeks, but it's split up into 2 3-week parts. You'll take the first 3 weeks of this course, and then we'll have our hybrid convening in March with an on-campus gathering and also opportunities to connect with the learnings at the convening through Zoom and other digital platforms. And then you'll come back and finish out the second 3-week part of the course. In terms of the type of projects you might be working on, I think this question applies more generally to the program as a whole and not just this course. Generally, I think folks coming into this program may be working at a media-focused organization. So perhaps you work at a tech-related industry or media-related industry, or an organization that's focused on media and social issues, like a media literacy-focused nonprofit organization. And you may be entering this program because you want to develop out your understanding of the intersection between social impact and media, and how you might use digital media to amplify your mission. But then another category of students, I think that, and I hope that will come to us, are working on or ideating on any type of mission-driven project or organization that could benefit from digital media outreach. And it's hard to think of a social impact project that doesn't fall into that bucket. So we're expecting to have a pretty broad range of projects that students are working on throughout the program. I think students who come in and are focusing on one or two projects or organizations will get a lot out of the program, because they'll move from developing a sort of general orientation towards mission-driven digital practices through to developing a plan for an actual digital outreach campaign. Thanks for that question. Other questions? Yeah, Jessica, thanks for that. I think it's perfectly fine to not be currently working at an organization. If you're someone who's generally interested in social advocacy, as you say, and political advocacy, this program will be really beneficial in terms of thinking about when and how digital media can advance a mission related to advocacy, and when and how it falls short, right? So I'm hoping to equip students with a well-rounded critical view of doing social change work with digital media tools. And I should also add that throughout the program, the assignments will always have at least two options. So one option is to apply this tool or framework directly to the work you're currently doing. Another option is to apply it to work that you are dreaming up or hoping to be working on in the future. And a third option that is pretty much cuts across all of the assignments is to think about this framework and apply it to a case study of an organization that you admire. So there's room for students at all different points in their career trajectories in this program. Great question. Any other questions? Sure, Jessica, take your time. Yeah, so great question. Most of the program is asynchronous, meaning that you are engaging with recorded lecture videos and assignments, text-based assignments on a regular basis. The content has a sort of rhythm to it, in that every Sunday morning Eastern time, we release a new week of content on Canvas, which is our learning management system. And then your assignment is due that following Saturday evening. So between release date and assignment due date, it's up to you, how you schedule your engagement with the assignments and with the course content. The lecture sessions are not live, they're recorded. So you can do this on your own time and on your own schedule. I will also add that we have flexibility in this program, and that you're not going to get points detracted if you submit something late. We know that life happens. Our learners are adult learners and are busy doing great things in the world, and we're certainly happy to be flexible around some of that timeline. The synchronous component of the program comes in March for the convening. And this year, because of all the safety concerns around COVID and traveling, we are hosting our convening in a hybrid format in which students will be welcomed and encouraged to join us on campus if they can and feel comfortable and safe. And we'll also be having a sort of simulcast of the convening through Zoom. And our plan is to make both of those experiences well-rounded and fulfilling and engaging for students, regardless of where they're joining us from. That convening is 3 days, takes place in March 2nd to 4th. And we hope that you can be available for that. It's a required part of the program, but if you absolutely can't make it, we can come up with some alternative plans. We also have a synchronous program opening that includes program orientation in February 1st to 2nd, but you're also highly encouraged to attend. There is work involved with that program opening. But again, like the convening, if you can't come, there will be ways to complete the assignments associated with that program opening and get credit for having engaged with the content there. Yep, and then we have our, as Ariel put in the chat, we have our program closing in June. That's optional, but I hope that students will join us because it's just a nice moment to commemorate, and we'll have some learning content there that will really round out the learning journey throughout the program. Awesome. That's great to hear. Yes, thanks for the reminder. We will also have weekly opportunities to join us for live conversations. We like to call them jam outs. They're kind of like group office hours, not at all required, but it is a nice opportunity to hop on Zoom as your schedule permits and chat with other students and our teaching fellows about the content you're working through that week. So if you're someone who really wants to be engaging with other folks and feeling like you're part of the learning community that moves through this program, it's a great way to connect and learn together. Any other questions? Again, we're just so excited about the launch of this new program. The faculty in this program and the people behind the scenes who are making the video content happen are just incredible and really talented. And I think at the leading edge of research in this space, we're so excited to connect that knowledge and that content with people like you who are doing amazing work to make the world a better place. So we appreciate you taking the time to be here. Really hope that you'll apply. Would love to talk with you more. So feel free to email us at this admissions account. Happy to schedule a call with you if that's helpful. But otherwise, we look forward to receiving your application and getting to know you with this inaugural cohort. So thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.